about stories of sustainability and environmental learning that's going on in schools across Victoria. This afternoon, we're going to set the foundation for this series with one of the fundamental skills of preparing for the future, of being able to imagine a future as our planetary processes shift around us, and being able to imagine a future to enable us to positively shape life to thrive on this planet. Stories of Sustainability is part of Education for Sustainability Starts with Teachers, which is funded by the Department of Education and Training Strategic Partnerships Program. So I'm thankful to the support from the Department of Education and Training, to all my staff and colleagues from Environment Education Victoria, and to the support from the committee members as well. So now I'd like to introduce you to Cyrelle, our presenter this afternoon. Cyrelle is the Acting Manager for Education at Sustainability Victoria, and she manages the award-winning Resource Smart Schools program. She's a trained secondary geography teacher and has spent the last 15 years working with students in a range of education settings, including environmental education centres, zoos in both New South Wales and Victoria, and working with pre-service teachers at universities. Cyrelle's passion about sustainability, the environment, conservation, and young people has helped form understandings about the role of education for sustainability and what it can play in student wellbeing, in values formation, and in childhood development. So I'm going to hand over to you now, Cyrelle, for our session this afternoon, and I look forward to joining everybody in the activities this afternoon.
Great, thanks Dominic, and thanks for that intro. It's really exciting. Like, it's an exciting space to be in, I think, at this point in time, because we're seeing, I think, a real shift in how we approach education. As I sit in my spare bedroom, which is now my home office and has been for the last 5 months or so now. So it's definitely, I think this is a really good conversation to have at this point in time. So thanks for asking me to be here. I do want to give you a little bit of a background on me, because I do come from that environmental education background, and I've spent many years working with students. But I also, I also want you to understand that my understanding of this world and the opportunities out there are definitely not solely my own. They're a combination of ideas. They're from learnings from books, from great communicators and educators. They're from conversations I've had with incredible people that have been really generous with me with their knowledge and their time. I've got a great network of mentors, of friends, of colleagues and family members that should definitely take credit for these ideas. And I'm really grateful to be surrounded by amazing people who constantly inspire me. So please don't take me as an expert in this space. I'm someone who has interpreted what I've learnt into an activity. It worked really, really well. And I think it has some value and can be interpreted into a classroom format and remote learning quite easily. And that's what I want to take you through today. So, I came across futures thinking as a concept when I was studying my master's in environmental ed. They ran an amazing course there at Macquarie Uni in the early 2000s. But then it was reintroduced to me working with a friend of mine, and she can actually put down as her job title as a futurist, which blew my mind, because I kind of thought, oh, if I knew there was a role and a job as a futurist when I was a student, I wonder where I would be today. And if I had actually studied futures at school, I wonder what my future, what my present today would actually look like. And when I sort of thought about that, and I thought about the intersections between futures thinking and environmental education, I thought that there was a great space there to explore that could actually encourage different thinking skills in students that I think would actually help them in their future. It would help them with their well-being now, because the intersections with futures thinking and purpose-driven and hope are all around how we perceive our futures. And what really sort of struck home to me is when we were talking about futures with this wonderful person who I'm really proud to call my friend, I actually asked her the question on what percentage of the population can envision futures. And it was a really interesting answer, because they don't have specific research on it. But what it's actually based on how you view the future is based on kind of your stage of thinking development. So I'm going to read this out, because I asked her this question via text and it took her weeks to get back to me, and I don't want to get it wrong. And so I'll read it out as she's sent it to me, and hopefully that will inspire you to think a little bit differently about how we envision futures. So the question was, what percentage of the population can envision futures? And this is the response. Approximately 50% of the adult population have only foundational linear thinking, and so they look to the past to understand the present. So they can only hold a vision for the future that others give to them. And that's 50% of the population. And for me, I was just like, wow, I can really see evidence of that happening around in certain areas of the world at the moment, where people are really grasping for a vision of the future, and people are putting that up for them. And I think 2040 did a really great job at being able to create a vision of an alternative futures for people. A further 30% have advanced linear thinking, so they can imagine a future or an either or that future, so kind of the positive and the negative. But the future is typically an extrapolation of the present and is usually only 5 to 8 years out from present day. A further 15% have contextual thinking capacity, so that's early systems thinking. So futures thinking and multiple scenarios creation becomes more likely, but the futures are likely to be biased towards equality rather than objective. So they're kind of even Stevens. And the remaining 5% have advanced systems thinking and beyond. So that means that they have complex adaptive futures thinking that can also consider non-locality, emergence, and infinite time horizons. That's when it becomes more likely. And that's 5% of the population. So that conversation kind of really struck at me, because I kind of thought, oh, if we have a population that can't envision a positive future for the environment, then how are we actually going to achieve that? And it intersected also with another conversation that I had with another wonderful educator who worked with pre-service teachers at a university here in Victoria. And she'd been doing some research with her students to see whether or not there was a link between reading habits and how they perceive their futures. And what she, and this is just a recollection from a conversation, but what she was saying is that the people who were predominantly reading nonfiction, they couldn't imagine a future. So their future was kind of just learning from that past. Those who predominantly read fantasy or romance, they could definitely imagine futures. But it was kind of a future where if there was a problem, there would be a magic wand fix. So if we're talking about environmental problems in the future, that they would be relying on things like technology in order to achieve the outcomes that were desirable. But those students who were predominantly reading science fiction, they could imagine multiple futures and understand their role in society now to achieve those futures, even if they weren't a part of that future, because it was in such long term. And when I was thinking about that, I was like, how amazing to have those conversations at very similar points in time. Because if you kind of put those things together, does education play a really important role in how people see the world? Can we teach futures thinking skills and give students tools, and so we can start to balance those numbers out a little bit more, bring more people out of that 50% where they're actually grasping onto someone else's vision of the future and actually moving them through those thinking stages. And so we have more people that are able to envision long-term futures. The last part of that conversation that I had with that friend was, of course, good futures thinking practices can scaffold people's and groups of any level to more sophisticated forms of futures thinking that they might not be able to do unaided. And for me, that is the crux of kind of bringing in futures thinking activities into classrooms and introducing children to thinking about their future in different ways. And that's what we're going to explore today. So what we will do today is I'm going to take you through an activity that I ran that I think translates really well into a classroom, and you should be able to do it with multiple age groups as well. If I was in a classroom and especially working with an eco group, I'd definitely be using an activity like this to start your planning around your school environment management plans, because visioning a future and especially long-term futures for kids could actually increase the level of benevolence and altruism if they're imagining a future at their place or in their place where they actually can't, they won't be a part of that conversation, they won't be a part of that community anymore, but they have imagined a future for the whole school and I suppose the future generations moving through it. So hopefully we'll have a little bit of fun, because I hope the future is going to be fun. So I want these activities to be fun as well. And then I'm going to take you through, after those activities, I'll go through a process that we did with a group of professionals on trying to achieve an action plan for getting to zero net carbon by 2050. So I hope you're all ready. And I'm hoping that this works. There we go. Okay, now I hope you've got a piece of paper, and I also hope that you have something to draw with. Colours are always great. If you know anything about sort of that positive psychology space, colours, if you want to have more creativity in what you're doing, apparently colours help. I always draw with a different coloured pen. And with your piece of paper, hope everyone's got it. And I'm going to demonstrate this because I've just realised how many ways you can fold a piece of paper into 4 pieces. So the easiest way is fold down the long side in the middle and then fold again. And so you've got 4 quadrants. Okay, you can even draw your lines if you're so inclined. I like folding. So now that you've got 4 quadrants, what we're going to do, we're going to get your pens out, and I'm going to give you some time to be a little bit creative. In one of those quadrants, what I want you to write is the word best. So write it small, don't write it in the, like, you know, huge, because you need space in that quadrant to draw as well. I'm going to put my stop clock on because I'm going to give you a little bit of time to do this. But what I want you to do is imagine the best case scenario, and let's do schools. So let's think about a school in 2050. So we've got 30 years in the future, we've gone there. And what I want you to do is I want you to draw a picture of what a school in 2050 looks like, best case scenario. Like this is pure blue sky thinking. What would be your best case scenario school in 2050? Okay, and I want you to get drawing. The reason why I want you to draw is, rather than write, is because we find that writing's quite linear in manner, and what we want to do is actually develop those future thinking skills in a creative manner. So we want you to draw. I'm a terrible drawer, so don't feel like this is an art class or anything. I will show you, like, this is my drawing. Very basic, okay? It is not good. That's why I use crayons. Now, I'm going to give you 3 minutes to do this. So I want you to, for the next 3 minutes, draw a picture of your ideal scenario. Best school that you can imagine in 2050. In the last 5 seconds, it's almost over. And that's 3 minutes. So I'll get you to stop there. It seems like a long time, I have to say, when you're actually not doing the drawing activity, because I can see some heads there and it's just like, oh, but hopefully you've got something on there. Now, in one of the other quadrants, what I want you to do is write the word worst, just as you did with best. And now we're going to flip it. And I want you to draw in this quadrant an image of the worst case scenario for you. So what would schools look like in 2050 if the worst case scenario has happened. I'm going to give you maybe 2.5 minutes for this one because we won't dwell here. And I saw some people peeking up at 2.5 minutes. So we've already started. In the last 5 seconds. And you can stop now. Okay, so now we've got the best and we've got the worst. In the third quarter, I want you to write down business as usual. And I might just give you 2 minutes for this one because I can see lots of people are getting really great at this and doing it quite quickly. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes to draw a picture of, in 2050, if things just stay on the same trajectory that we're on now, what will schools look like in 2050? So I'll start the clock. Last 5 seconds. And that's it. Well done, everyone. I know it's pretty hard, forced creativity, especially with tight time frames. So you're doing really well. We do have one more quadrant to fill though. And so what I want you to do in the last one is wildcard. So if you write wildcard in there, and I'm just going to give you 2 minutes to do this one as well, is go nuts. Good, bad, whatever. Just something out of the ordinary, something fun, something maybe not so much fun, but I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do this one as well. So I'm going to start the clock now. We want outside of the box with this one. And that's it. That's your 2 minutes up. Well done. It was forced creativity after 4 p.m. on a Thursday. And I remember when I was doing my pre-service teaching that they said never do anything creative or teamwork related on a Thursday afternoon. And I did. And it was horrible, but you guys obviously did a really good job. And maybe that's one of the benefits of being in a remote environment. So what I want you to do now is have a look at your pictures. Well, and you know, these are 2-minute images that you've drawn in front of you. It makes me laugh when I reflect on the images that I create. But what I would want you to have a look at now is I want you to have a look at it through the lens of, if you had to put this up in an art gallery, not that we're going to do that, but if you had to put this up in an art gallery and have 3 words to describe your image, what 3 words would they be? Now, I don't want kind of like, this is great. I want sort of like, you know, things like nature connected, those kinds of things. So I want you to have a look and see whether or not you can have a look at the images that you've created, and for each one, grab around 3 words. And the only reason why I say 3 words is because I'm not going to give you very much time to do this. So I'm going to give you around, let's go 2.5 minutes to have a look at what words you would use to describe each of those images. You can go more if you want to. We just don't need a novel at this stage. Okay, and that's 2.5 minutes. So basically what you have in front of you is an example of futures thinking. You've gone through multiple lenses because the future, I'm going to read out the 3 laws of futures. The future is not predetermined. The future is not predictable. And future outcomes can be influenced by our choices in the present. And I really like those laws because basically what that's saying to us is that we've got a responsibility in creating our future. But in that, you've actually done multiple scenarios. So you've created 4 different scenarios about what the future of schools will look like, using the best case, the worst case, the business as usual, and then also a wild card. So you've actually just practiced a version of futures thinking. But what I find really interesting about this is that when we combine our futures together and we have a discussion about them, they kind of become even more interesting. When we think about diversity makes us stronger. What I would like you to do now is that I'm going to get Dominic to break you into groups. I think we're going to aim for around 4 people in each group. And I want you to share, you don't have to share your images if you don't want to, but share the words that you've used to describe it. The reason why I love imagery is because it's accessible to everyone. Everyone can draw. And also it uses a different part of your brain to be able to explain to others and yourselves what you're thinking. And I think it's a really nice way to get your creative brain working. So in these groups of 4, what you'll do is just discuss the words. You can discuss your images. You can introduce yourself, probably the best thing to do first. And then once you have that discussion, I want you to go through the words that you've got there. I'd be surprised if you don't have some of the words replicated, because obviously we're in the environmental education space, and so we're all we look at the world through a similar lens. But I want you, with those words, if someone can scribe in that group, I want you to split the words up into 3 different categories. I want you to split them up into the positives. I want you to split it up into things to avoid, and maybe some just really interesting, fun things out in your 3rd column. So if we've got 1 scribe in each group, 3 different ways to categorize your words. I kind of think about it: positive, negative, and fun, pretty much. Dominic, are you okay to split everyone into a group?
I am. How long do you want people to be in a group?
I know, I'm pretty much a timekeeper, I know. Maybe 3.5 minutes, is that enough?
3.5?
Yep.
Okay. Well, it's going to be let me do 3 point. No, it's not going to let me do. We can have 3 or 4.
4. Go 4.
4 minutes.
I'm generous.
Okay, and they're only going to get about 15 seconds to leave the room. So once the room timer happens, you have to wrap up. So you've got 4 minutes, and you're going to magically disappear into groups now. All right, here we go.
Have fun.
That was not very long to be in a room.
No, I know.
That's fine though. It gets you talking quickly. Hello, everybody rejoining us. Fabulous. I know that wasn't very long in the room. Very speedy sharing going on for teachers would be a huge challenge. But we all do have our words written down. So if we feel like we haven't said our piece, then Cyrelle, I'm sure, will pick some people to add some more if they don't feel like they got enough share time in there. But thank you for everybody for joining those rooms, and back to Cyrelle.
Well, I think it's a good demonstration that maybe you could do that in a small break time with students, maybe. Especially during a lunchtime break. When I think about this activity, I think about working with a green leaders group at a school, and being able to have it short and sharp and hopefully energizing. Then, yeah, I would hope that you'd be able to do this with a very short time frame. Now, what I'd love you to do is that if you do have a scribe that has taken a record of everyone's thoughts, could you pop them in the chat for us, and so we can start to collate everyone's thoughts about what kind of what does a future school look like? What are the words that we want to focus in on?
Do you want people to share the positives, Cyrelle, or all 3?
All 3 would be great.
Fabulous. So the positives, the things to avoid, and the fun stuff about the future.
It's just not working. Dominic, you might have to read them out as they come up, if that's okay.
Do that right now. I didn't realize you can make chat full screen on this thing. So we've got positives: hope, clarity, connection, carbon neutral, sustainable, a great system. And to add to that, happy, animal, farms, refining, native, instinctive, connected, Indigenous connections. And more to that, wonderful world, sustainable, interactives, wildlife, hopeful, outdoors, kitchen garden, connected. And another lot of positives: happy, free, bright, immersive, nature, wilderness, exciting, connected, and creative. And I'm going to finish with the positives: outdoor, school garden, play, enjoy, creativity, green, well-being, accessible, hands-on, and garden. And I'm going to put the negatives there in the middle so that we can finish on the fun things.
Yeah, great.
So things to avoid, here we go: sad, dull, concrete, disconnected, isolation, unpredictable, mediocre, save our earth, in inverted commas, destructive, selfish, concrete, small windows, unsustainable, inside, despair, broken, dehumanizing, apocalypse, death, school with no children, soulless, depressing, sad, trapped, uncertain, tiring, polluted, grey, under-resourced, compartmentalised, urban, 100% isolated, individualism and consumerism. Now, I don't want to end on a sad note, so let's go to the fun stuff. All right, let's go to my fun. Sustainable hub in every school.
Ooh, that'd be nice.
Nature, playground, connected, outdoor, play, well-being, garden, a kitchen garden. And that's the end of our thinking. I'm sure there were lots more words than that, but that's a great summary of it.
Excellent. That's really great. And it's quite interesting. You can see that we all, I think, share a pretty common lens in which we both see the world, but also envision that world as well. And what I would do is that with this activity, I would actually stop that there for students. But what I want you to do, or what I want to show you now, is the process that we went through with the Zero Carbon Community Practice, which was a group of 80 adults in a space. And we did a workshop, and the workshop was quite extraordinary. It ran from 9:30 in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon. And we had around 80% of the people stay afterwards to debrief the session for the day. And I don't think I've ever been to a workshop where we've had that many people finish at the end. But what we did is that we started with exactly the same activity that you did just then, and we actually shifted it and up a gear to actually come up with a plan to allow us to achieve what a zero carbon community would look like in 2050. So I'm going to take you through that right now. Oh, no, before I do that, I'm going to talk about this. Like, basically what I love about that exercise is that you've created a staircase. And so you've created the goal at the top of the staircase there. You know what you want to create. You know what you want to avoid, and you want to know the fun things that are going to get you to that goal in 2050. Basically, now all you need to do is walk up that staircase to achieve your goal. And when you're walking up that staircase, I use that metaphor because I think it's every step that you take is towards that goal that you've created. And I think it's even more powerful when you do that as a group, especially for a school, when you think about sort of students coming together to imagine what their school could look like in the future, and then them being able to take steps. Now, it's not as simple as being able to obviously just walk up a staircase. There's a little bit more intricacies to it, but I think there's a way that we could actually do some strategic foresight thinking and planning. And you can do that as an intergenerational activity where you actually do have young people and you've got elders in that same space sharing their knowledge and their passion for things like environmental education, things like the schooling system, to be able to work together to include student voice in that visioning exercise, and to teach young people and elders how to think differently about their futures. So when we ran this exercise, we ran an exercise based on people and how people, members of the community, would experience a zero carbon world. I think there's a lot of research out there about how sectors are going to get to zero carbon emissions by 2050, but we couldn't find anything that really articulated what that experience would look like for me and for you and for students going through today. So we really wanted to embed this activity in how we experience the world, how we live in it, how we work in it, how we play, how we learn, and how we move. We had 2 tables, each allocated to one of these activities, and they actually spent the whole day investigating what the future of living, working, playing, learning, and moving would look like. The first step was exactly the same step as what you did. They all drew pictures. Some of them were great. And out of 80 people, I was really proud that only 2 of them actually described their future using words. Everyone else sort of dug in and or dug out their creative skills. And this is what they came up with. They came up with some really succinct ideas, and being a similar community to what I see the environmental education community to be, it was quite single-minded, what they wanted and what they didn't, and it was quite easy to come up with 80 people's ideas into these, I guess, categories. Following this, we actually asked them on their tables to then go, okay, if this is what you want to create and this is what the future looks like, we want you to flip that and we want you to actually create some futures statements. So we want you to write as though you're in the present tense, you are sitting in 2050 and you are writing a description of what the world looks like now using the first activity. And this is what they came up with. I made sure that learning got in there because, of course, being an educator, I was really, I guess, interested to see what a zero carbon community of practice would think about education in the future. And as you can see, there's a couple of things in there that that came out in those positives that you stated as well. And I love this observing and connecting learning with nature. I think it's a wonderful thing. And I also really like this diverse learning experiences with cultures and generations. And so basically what this is doing now is creating a real visual for the different types of things that we want to be seeing in 2050. The next thing that we wanted to do, and this is probably the part where I would say working with students, you really need to have some guidance in that space because it gets a little bit trickier. And your life experience that you can bring to that understanding definitely will assist. Now, collective impact is a process that we use at Sustainability Victoria, but what I want you to focus on is down here, this cultural and social, the governance and economic, and working towards a zero carbon future. So this picture down here, basically what we did is that we've created this 2050. We've created the sun, we've created this vision of what we want to see in the world. And then instead of walking up the staircase, we're actually going to construct the staircase from the top down. And so what we asked our participants to do is to go, okay, just think about 2040. If you think about 2040, what are the milestones that we need to reach in 2040 to ensure that we reach your goal in 2050? So what are the things that we need to tick off to say that we're in motion of achieving? And then we asked them to think about it through different lenses. We wanted them to think through the systems that support our world to work, specifically the cultural and social system, the governance system, and the economic system. And the reason why we bring this in at this stage is because the systems are not static, they're not set in stone. They can change. And what we wanted people to realise is that if we want to achieve this goal, what are the underlying systems that we need to put in place to support that to happen? And so the changes don't just happen with activities that we do, but it's actually with the foundations. And those can change over time too, which I felt was a really empowering moment to just go, oh yeah, that's right. The economic system that we're based on at the moment, that doesn't need to be what happens in 2050. We can shift that, but there are actions that we need to take now and in the future to ensure that those systems are created to support the future that we want. From 2040, we did the same activity back to 2030. Then we went down to 2025, the same activity again, but what we were doing is working from the last milestone. So we're setting up milestones at each of those significant periods, and then we flipped it. So from 2025, we kind of went, okay, here are our milestones that we need to meet in 2025. So what do we need to do in the next 12 months in order for us to get to our first milestone, which will then get us to the next milestone, which will then eventually get us to our goal that we want to achieve in 2050. And this is what they came up with. And what I think is really interesting about this is that if we had asked them to do this activity just from the beginning, even if they'd done their imagery, I wonder if they would have come up with exactly the same activities here to achieve their 2050 goal. I think doing that backcasting exercise is a really interesting one, because what it does is it it situates you in the future in different time frames. And then by flipping that thinking around, you actually can really, really focus in on what you want to achieve. But it's not what you want to achieve in 3 years, it's actually what you want to achieve in the next 30 years up until 2050. And what's great about, well, I have to say, if anyone is ever running a workshop, getting a graphic recording done is brilliant. And it's so much easier to be able to talk to people about the energy within the event when you've got an image like this. But what we found really interesting is that we have two that are very, very similar to one another, but they came out of two very different groups. And so we've got identify the skills, knowledge and community activity and jobs needed. And then you've got map the skills. And we actually took this to the DET and they created an activity for us to start to think about what are the skills that we're going to need for a zero carbon future. So I think this activity can be really powerful, especially when you can articulate it in a way that, that works for people. So that was kind of the end of the day. At the end of the day, everyone came up and voted on their top 10, and that's what you're seeing here. But that process of futures thinking hopefully is broken sort of like the barriers that we put on ourselves by thinking within the systems that constrain us in this space and time, and hopefully allows people to feel empowered about what they can do in the future. Now, I want to do this activity with students. I can't wait to do that, but we'll definitely do that as an intergenerational activity. And so we'll have elders in the room as well. The benefits of this, I think, we ran an activity sort of over 12 months ago now called the Climate Change Education Forum. And we really wanted to focus on hope and future, getting kids to think positively about their future. And we did that initially just by asking them key questions. But then we took the secondary students through this activity with a lot of elders in the room as well. And what I found is that out of all of these processes, the one thing that I think is really interesting for kids is this examine the possibilities, which is the activity that we've just done. I think it's a space where kids can play. And by developing and practicing those skills about thinking about the future, I think we can actually start to see real change in the way that they feel empowered that they can make change. So I might leave it there because it's like spot on 5 o'clock, Dominic. Do you have anything that you want to ask? If there's any questions, feel free to pop them in, and then what we might do is I can try to answer them. And then we can share those as a sort of like Q&A sheet later.
So Brendan's got a question already. Are these available as posters for schools?
Oh my gosh, that would be very interesting, wouldn't it? They aren't available as posters, but we could definitely, like, I'm pretty sure that I can share this with you. So you could feel free to make them into a poster.
Yep. And there's an agreement that yes, people would like that.
Really?
And Hayden's asked, where can I get the slides?
Well, Dominic, I think Dominic can send them to you.
Yep, I will do that. So I've recorded the presentation, but Cyrelle will also send me the slides, and I will follow up with an email to everybody that was here today with that information. And there's some congratulations for you from Liz Turner, fitting the whole lot into 1 hour.
I know. Yeah. If anyone is doing remote teaching at the moment in Victoria and they've got a class that they want to trial this with, I haven't even, like, this has just popped up, and I know there's people from Sustainability Victoria in the audience that'll be laughing right now. But if you want to trial this with students, I would love to do it for you. So if you've got a class that you want to run something like this with, please get in touch. I have my email address here. And I'd love to give it a go. I think it'd be really interesting. Sorry, that was just a thought bubble that came out of my mouth.
Yeah, well, it's a perfect opportunity now, for teachers in Victoria to get access to people that they may not access necessarily when they're in a classroom. And even for people across Australia, like normally you may not be able to share your time like this. Yeah, so there's some great thanks. Thank you, wonderful, and great new way of looking at things. Thank you very much, and a fantastic session, Cyrelle. I can see us using this in our futures thinking at Eve. And someone, Shalani, has said, I might take you up on that offer, Cyrelle. Senior teachers are thinking about running an experts week at school.
Awesome. I think it'd be really fun. It'd be
Yeah,
interesting
absolutely.
I have a feeling that if we did this with kids, like their ideas about what a school would look like would be totally different to ours. And I think they would not have the same kind of bridled thinking that I think we have. Well, I have anyway.
I'm sure it'd be great to see the diversity of ideas, and probably with more practice too about what you're thinking about your future is actually for. Like, we're coming from it from an environment sustainability perspective, but if you might be thinking about it from other perspectives.
Yes.
Great. And Jackie was saying she'd love to see the results from a school session too. So I am going to wrap up there, because we have kept to time really beautifully this evening, and these stories things aren't meant to be going on and on forever. They're just meant to be a little snapshot taster for people across Victoria, across Australia, to think about sustainability in different ways. And in the coming weeks, we will be hearing from teachers, secondary teachers at the moment, who are working with students on sustainability and environment initiatives in their school. And we will be able to hear about how it works in their setting, the kinds of structures that exist and the way that they think about sustainability. And it'll be great to bring this futures lens to that when we do hear those people sharing. So thank you to everybody for coming along this afternoon. I will send you a little quick survey. It's just 10 short questions. It really helps with my development of these sessions, and also in the feedback to the people who provide the funding for them. And I will be in touch with everybody shortly. So yeah, share it widely with your friends, and the recording as well. And hopefully I'll see you at next week's session with Paula McIntosh from Melbourne Girls College. Have a great evening, everybody, and we will see you next week, or if not, see you sometime in the future.
Thanks everyone for participating. Well done.